For there. I am a practicing full-time artist. I also am a educator. I've been teaching over at the Corcoran when it used to be the Corcoran, and then we did a satellite class over at the McLean Project of the Arts. I grew up in this area. I basically grew up in McLean, and now I live over here in Arlington. I studied under Man Quan, which was a Chinese watercolor master back in the 70s, late 70s, in Jacksonville University in Florida. And during that time, painting was dead. It was really hard to get a degree in studio art at that time. And so I actually got a degree in studio art and music and with education. And I joined the airlines and I flew around for the first 10 years only so I could go to every single museum that was out there. And that's really why I flew. It was a great way to make money. I only had to work about 10 days a month. And I got to meet a lot of people and exposed to some wonderful ideas. But my journey really started with painting very realistically. And where I am right now was a long journey. And I'm going to take you through it really quickly. And since all of us have a passion for art, I want to talk about how one really becomes creative. And when people say, where do you start? We all know we sort of start with a blank piece of paper. But where do those ideas come from? And how can you get them on paper? And sometimes you feel frustrated. And every single great artist I know has. Basically, in my journey as being a creative thinker, just like my friend Jerry, who was a Air Force pilot, has changed his career many different times. And a career or a passion, you don't have to make money off of it. You just have to love what you're doing. And when you do, you excel at it. And so not every great artist is a good teacher, and not every good teacher is a good artist. And a lot of artists are not articulate enough to express it. I find that when I'm painting and teaching my class, it's a little hard because I usually have to paint upside down and backwards. But because of that, I've really been able to use what's called brain gym, which means I use both sides of my brain. And when we start working in art, a lot of us forget that this is a tool. This is a creative media. But if you had been a ballerina, you would be stretching your muscles before you go on stage. If you were a football player, you do the same thing, you would stretch. If you're a singer, you would warm up your voice. If you jog, you would warm up your muscles. And yet artists have a tendency not to warm up before they start their projects. Sometimes they get frustrated and say, I don't know where to start. So I'm going to give you a place to start and talk about my journey and how that place I started changed my work. And so Man Quan taught me how to paint in a very Eastern way. I had to do one brushstroke at a time and copy him. And it took a long time to get to the next brushstroke, and we would copy our masters, and I am a watercolor master. It is something that I wouldn't recommend to anybody because it's a long, boring journey, learning one technique and practicing it again and again and again until you can do it with your eyes closed. But the interesting thing about this is my personality. I have no patience. I love running fast, and I love a little bit of danger, and I like a little bit of excitement, and I like being with people. And really being an artist, sometimes you have to have that alone time, that solitude time. And so I've been able to take sort of Eastern practice and Western practice and sort of mix them up together. And I have a hybrid practice. And so I'm going to take you into my practice and show you how I create. And this might help you no matter who you are, no matter what type of art you're doing, because it's not really about art. It's about how to think creatively. And right now, we need a lot of wonderful scientists out there thinking creatively. We need engineers, we need architects, we need city planners. We need our humanity to come together and start thinking differently than we've ever done before. And some of the things I'm going to be teaching you today is really the starting point of how to really be creative. It's not about doing great pictures. It's about coming up with new solutions. And the cool thing is about being creative, it's almost unlimited like numbers. It's like mathematics. There's an answer to every single problem. We just have to figure out how to get there. And even with the computers, there's like 3 or 4 ways to do anything. Sometimes it's frustrating, but the cool thing is there's always an answer. And if he's talking about absolutes, like absolute truth, which we need to do more about being truthful, but there's a truth can't be bended. It's mathematically 2 + 2 is 4. But if I just said 4 to you guys, there's many different ways that we could get to that 4. And so this is where the journey is going to be today. And you guys can ask me questions, but I want to show you what happened to me and how we can take creative thinking, and it could be art, or it could be being a master gardener, or making the best bread possible, or living in a restricted environment and having unlimited sources. We need to think differently as a 21st century citizen of the world. And so I hope this will inspire you to sort of think this way. So Mon Quan taught me how to paint. And when we did something wrong, he told us so. And you sort of get like a thick skin. And I just wanted to paint unlike everybody else, but I learned how to paint very realistically with an academic background. And so I'm going to take you really quickly, and I'm going to change my cameras to my overhead camera here. So there we go. All right. And so what he would do is, or what I do is I warm up. And like I said, every artist needs to warm up no matter what. And this is just like a little Zen board. And what I do is before I do anything, when I come into my studio, when I start practicing, I just take this, I have a big board at my studio, but I just take my brush and I work at my technique. And maybe I go down and up, and I do this little brush stroke and a little brush stroke. And what that does is sort of helps me think about what I can paint. And I do it with the opposite hand. I take my brush, take it down, and make a brush stroke. And so it's not about doing anything, but it's about having control. And sometimes when I'm painting this way, maybe I'll do a brush stroke like this, and then I could do like a little beak, and all of a sudden I have like a little bird. The idea is to warm up with both hands. And this is just black construction paper. There we go. And I can maybe start with like a little E, and I go around and around and around. And it's not about painting things. It's really about just warming up. And then taking it in my opposite hand and doing the same thing, going around, going around, going around, going around. This is so cool. And I'm going to come right back here. So what I do before I do anything in my studio is I try to warm up both sides of my brain and sort of get it fired up. And like I said, like how a ballerina would stretch her muscles. So basically, even if I'm like doing something that's sort of like scary, maybe giving a big lecture, I do this too. I take my hands, and you guys can all do it with me. So I make 2 fists, and I have 1 thumb up and 1 pinky up. And I think Corey's done this with me before. So just 1 thumb up and 1 pinky up, and then opposite, 1 pinky, 1 thumb. And it's a way to warm up your brain. And then you cross it over. It's a little difficult, isn't it? Yeah. So what it's doing scientifically is there's things going in your brain like fireworks, making connections. It helps you with getting your thought across. It's like having a little bit of caffeine. So let's go back to my overhead. another way of doing it to wake up your brain is I play the piano. And what it is, I put my fingers down and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I lift up each finger separate and I sort of like jump around. So maybe I'll say 5 and 10, 2, 3, 6, 8. And then I do something like this and I cross them over. And then I do the same thing. I just lift up one finger at a time. And that really wakes up your brain. I'm gonna pull this up a little bit. So now that I'm sort of awake and I'm now gonna be using my words, the first thing I do is after I do my little Zen board, here I go, and I just have fun taking the brush in either hand and crossing over. And if you want to do more research on it, this is called brain gym. We do this in Montessori schools now, really to quiet someone down. And so what I do is I usually take, let's see, I'll switch papers right here and show you my little demo. So when I want to start painting is I usually get some scrap paper. There we go. And I just go ahead and I give myself a border. Problem solving is sometimes having some issues and trying to figure things out. For instance, a long time ago, I taught a STEM class where I had young teenagers and we gave them 2 hours to do anything they wanted. And after 2 hours, everyone was still on the cell phone. I had another STEM class and I said to everyone, I would like you to make a square. And in the square, I want you to fill it up with a shape. And sometimes what I just do is I take like little shapes and I just go something like this. And when I told the students that they had limits and they had some problems to solve, they had to take some balloons and rubber bands and some old plastic bottles and paper, and they had to make something that would move across the room and straws. And they built things like wings and airplanes. Every single student became engaged when I gave them problems to solve. So as artists or creative thinkers, if I just said, go ahead and take a piece of paper and create, you don't know what you're doing. But when you have something like to warm up, just like something like this, and I'm gonna do like, here's something too. I just sometimes take my pen, I go around, and I go around. And it's not about making something. It's really about seeing the possibilities. I'm going to show you. So something like this, all I did is I just made some circles. I might come back and do some little bit of drawing in between. Okay, and I do it with both hands. And the reason I'm doing this is because I love the feeling of it. I love how I can't really control it. And so, let's see what I have here. And here's another little piece of paper. And I'm just going to take my little markers and I'm going to just, this is like a little slide. And I'm just going to go ahead and overlap them. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're making marks on a blank piece of paper. And that's, first of all, you're breaking the blank piece of paper of possibilities. And sometimes I use markers. And there we go. And sometimes I overlap them. And this is just warm up. This is nothing, this is not serious art. This is enough to say, I'm getting my creative on. Okay, so I got a lot right here to show you. And let me bring this up a little bit higher so you can see my whole plate. Okay, so I got things happening here and they're just warming up. And then I do the same thing. I like it to sort of disappear. So I didn't use Sharpies. I use water base pens and I wet it. And basically, it's not the final project trying to get something beautiful. It's really about warming up and starting to have it disappear. And so as I wet this, you can sort of see that it is like just melting and changing. And the same thing with these two. I can take this and I can melt these together and I can start painting. And I think you can warm up drawing or painting, and it just gives you so much more freedom. And then going back to my little boogie board, you sort of see my boogie board is drawing a little bit too. And so I like using this type of paper because I can use it over and over and over again. Or the black paper. You know, the black paper is great. But when I'm doing something like this, then I get to the point where I can break out my paints. And when I break out my paints, basically it's sort of like a series of warming up again. I can come in, and maybe in this case, I can start painting. I can start working with my brush strokes. There's my little bird. You know, it doesn't matter what I'm painting. Okay, I'm gonna go around and around and around like this, do it with my opposite hand, and then maybe come and do that little brush stroke. And I sort of got like a little flower happening. And it's fun because I can really just sort of play. And that's one thing that we don't do as artists. We forget how to play. And by taking your tools, which could be a marker or brushes, and warming up, and this is not precious, and even if you're just practicing doing a simple brush stroke, you are doing so much in the arts because you are experimenting and you are playing like a child, and we forget how to play these days. And it's really important that we react and be joyful and not that serious. And that's what play is about. And I think if you could do that one thing, again, like I sometimes just use notebook paper or sticky paper. And when I use sticky paper, you know, I just do my warm-ups. I call these Zens. And it doesn't matter what it is. It's the fact that I'm playing and reacting. Why is this important? It's because it does a couple things. It opens up the possibilities, and you can look, and I'm going to show you what happened to me, why this sort of opened up. So let me go over here, get rid of my water before I start showing you anything else. There you go. So this is basically what I do now. And the way I got here took me about like 30 or 40 years to get here. So I'm going to give you like a little journey of my work. Okay, let's see, I'll go a little higher to show you. So I just pulled a couple watercolors to show you. And this is basically, let's see, which is the best way? Wait a minute, I'm gonna center it so you can see it. Or hold on a second. Maybe this might be better. Okay, so this is how I used to paint. Pretty realistic. Watercolors are one of the most uncontrollable type of media there is. And basically—
Barbara, excuse me, Barbara. There are two questions from Clayton.
Okay. Question.
In the chat.
Okay. Emit. Okay. We have somebody from the Apple company that just joined us. Hey. Okay. So basically, watercolors is staining paper. And because I was taught how to paint realistically or more academically, you know, these are like good little studies. And like here's another study. I used to go up to Maine all the time and paint. I painted very realistically, so this is done in oils. I just pulled some to show you, you know, and when you paint in oils, you can paint over your mistakes. When you paint in watercolors, you can't. But my journey really started with, I got bored with painting things. And the thing is, you got a camera for that, you know, but painting I wanted to get the transparency of the glass, and I usually paint in series. So there's a whole bunch of these in here and a little bit of lace. And I'll show you how abstract it is. And so I've been painting this way for a long time. And then something happened. I really got bored with painting realistically. And this painting sort of special to me because this one sort of helped me see that I can do it this way or this way. And I started playing with, things that were realistically and maybe working with the three-dimensional part. And I found that I got really interesting in more of the textures and more of the abstract areas. So let's see what we have here. And so it was sort of like, I'll go up to the camera. It was these areas that really got me more excited than painting a realistic work. So this is what I was sort of known for doing for a long time. And I got to go a little bit higher. Sorry to show you. There we go. Okay. I think you guys can see my camera's a little strange. So I was painting people out in the street. Now I'm going to go back to this camera. Sorry, let's go back. So I was painting people walking down the street in O-Town. When they turned 300 years, I was selected as the artist to represent them. And all the flags that are going down the street, I did those. And I would go out on the street and I would watch people and sort of working on my visual memory. And I did so much stuff in print. And so for years I was painting like this, very realistic. And then it turned out, I'm going to show you, there we go. And even in watercolors, showing the white of the paper. And then what I would try to do as I'm teaching, I would try to challenge myself. And I did like a woman's ship up in Annapolis, and I was working with all this texture and this color. And I just finally said to myself, I'm not really sure if I want to paint this way for the rest of my life. And then something happened. And basically what happened was I realized as a flight attendant, I forgot to go to Paris and study under the Impressionists and look at all the Impressionist art. So I took a couple months off, and this was about 7 years ago, and I lived in Paris for a few months. And when I came back, my husband asked me what I learned. And the truth was I stopped going to the museums after about a week and hung out with a lot of my French girlfriends and went to jazz clubs. And when I came back, I painted this. And what happened is I started dreaming about the sensation of color and what color really does. And it was color that I wanted to be my subject matter and not a thing. I didn't want to paint an apple anymore. I didn't want to paint a tree or a lighthouse. I wanted it to be the feeling that I would get when I saw a Morris Louis or a Helen Frankenthaler, the idea of a big color field. And so the first thing I had to do was I had to work at finding the right tools. And so I went out and got some brooms and mops and gave them haircuts and started painting really big. And I got some artwork to show you. And so let's see if I can hold it up. So what I would do is like this type of brush stroke is you can sort of count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I would take my art and I would put it up on an easel after I would warm up. And then I would do these big, massive brush strokes. I was doing all this in watercolors, and I found that I had some control, and I was able to do these transparencies. But then what happened was I really wanted to go bigger than what the watercolor paper was. And there was 2 people in my life that were great artists, and they encouraged me to maybe move over to acrylics and canvas. And it was these 2 people that really affected me because they made me think about using acrylics and watering it down and using it. First I did it on paper, and then I moved over to the canvas. And I think it's so important to see my work. Oh, let me take this off. And so when I look at something like this, what it tells me is after I paint something, that's the end of the conversation I have with my art. I feel that it's the process of making it that I enjoy. And when people look at it, I let you guys imagine whatever you want. But once I put it down that brush, that's like the last time I really have a dialogue with my artwork. And I adore color. But what it is about color is I like the sort of the chess set mathematics about it, where you can put a dark color on top of a light color and still have the luminosity and having it shine through, having the paper radiate through the staining. And I found that being a watercolorist, I could do this both on paper and on canvas. And it's really about the complexity of the colors. This is a toned down orange. My grays are usually made from opposite colors, which are blues and oranges together. And everything is really about how it makes your eyes dance across the paper. And so doing a series of these, you can see this brush stroke coming down, and yet I blow out the dark purple and I reveal like a orange underneath. And so what makes these paintings hold together is they're, believe it or not, a limited color palette. They feel like they're very bright, but because I choose my colors wisely, and then this one I wanted to show you because many times it's brush strokes, but I let gravity sort of help me just sort of drag it down. But I also think there needs to be a lot of texture in there. And when I'm doing these, I actually sort of plan out the colors and I plan out the emotions. And because, you know, right now I'm showing you these smaller pieces, but in my studio, I paint very large, like 8 feet to 10 feet. And I think that the bigger the artwork, the more I have to warm up, because if I have to climb a ladder and then I do like a 6-foot stroke, I need to make sure that that brush is loaded with paint. And it's very physical when I'm going all the way across the canvas. And I'm going to show you some of those on my computer. And so I'm going to just end up with something like this. So when I start a painting, something like this, or let me start with maybe a smaller one. These are warm-ups. So getting back to Mon Quan. So the first thing I would do is I flip the painting over and I title it. And the reason I title it, most Western artists, they come up with a name for their paintings after they finish painting it, like a lighthouse on the hill, you know, whatever it is, and it's obvious. But I actually choose to title the paintings before I paint them. Again, part of my Eastern Mon Quan's influence, it's because it's a different way of centering your thoughts and sort of outlining what you're going to do. And when I title a painting, most of the time I do it to the music I'm listening to. And I listen to a lot of great rock and roll, a lot of nitty gritty blues. And so you'll find like a lot of my, you know, paintings are Jumping Jack Flash, very 60s, 70s, not so much 80s. But the reason I choose the music as my title is because if you look at an Oriental painting, they usually have chalk marks. And what those are is the creative thinker that was painting that. It's all the process of doing the work. And they're thanking the paper for the opportunity to come up with a poem. And then the painting supports the written words. So that's why I sign my paintings on the back. It helps me sort of think about my design and my color choices. And it helps me really sort of do some problem solving because I don't need to put every single thing into the painting. And so I wanted to show you what my studio looks like. So give me a moment here. So these are some pictures of my studio. There we go. Oh, no, this is a picture of a show I did last year over at the Amphitheater. And let me get some of these. Okay, so this is a little corner of my studio. And what I usually do is I have like 3 different rooms. And I usually, that metal thing over on the side is my easel. But what I like to do is I take the paintings off the wall, I throw it on the ground, I study it a little bit. And if you come over to my studio, if you want to buy something, you better take it with you, because if it stays in my studio, I might add another color. And that's happened before, where I've sent out pictures of my artwork and all of a sudden someone wants to buy it and I can't find it. And that's very frustrating. So this is one that I had recently stretched, and it was in We the People show. And this is something I'm so proud of from last year. 3 paintings that held together, and it's part of the affordable housing lobby. And let me just go through here. And this is to show you how I sort of do my colors. I use a lot of gravity. I think you can probably see one of my brooms. The problem is with my brooms and my brushes, I need to clean them immediately, because acrylic paint will dry on the brushes and they ruin them. And unlike watercolors, but it's okay. Even if I find that I have dry paint on my brushes, it gives it a little bit more texture. This is like an overall of what my studio looks like. You walk into one room and you see the other. I did a mural not too long ago, which was right in Arlington, and I painted on metal. So I love these little challenges. But when you look at my work, you can actually sort of see the combination of what I'm doing. It very mathematically. It's really shape making, and it is about color theory. But if you do watercolors, you know you can't put yellow over blue because it's going to make green. So I'm really challenging the paper by using light colors on top of dark colors and still having it glow. And my whole point is I love even having a little bit of bits of texture showing through. And so when I'm flooding these with big brush strokes, I'm also coming back and working on negative and positive shapes and pulling some colors away. And this one you can sort of see I'm washing a little bit of the corners away. And I think that's sort of important to see. This is a work that's done on canvas. And it has, I absolutely love working on canvas. I was scared for a long time because canvas acts differently than paper. But when we come right down to it, there's something about canvas that all the colors sort of like soak in like paper. And it's a more serious media to work in. And so this is how I left my studio the other day. And I have I'm working a little bit in my backyard now. But the thing about my studio is I can make a big mess and I can close the door and I can come back. And so I just think the process of being an artist is pushing yourself to change, never feeling comfortable where you are, but knowing that the next great work is coming to you and letting go very easily. And it was a very dear friend, Paul Reed, who was one of the Washington Color School artists, that actually got me to stop painting on paper and with watercolors and move over to canvas. And so I feel as an artist, it's our job as an instructor to make sure that I encourage my students to keep exploring and pushing and never getting so comfortable that they think that it can never change. Because I had someone, I was very lucky that they pushed me to be a better artist than I could possibly be. And everybody that's not an artist, I have to say we're all creative, but please think about bringing in art in your homes, art from your area artists, because we need people to support the creative commerce. And if people don't buy art, or if artists don't buy each other's art and we don't support each other, what we're going to do is we're going to find out that everything's a baby gap and we're not going to have creative outlets. And Andrea, who introduced herself earlier, was talking about the Metro Micro Gallery I used to have. And what that was part of my studio practice. I had such a big studio that I took a little bit of it that was facing the street, and it was only like 8 by 8. And it was what's called a discovery station, that anybody that was walking outside could view the room. And I would invite different artists in. And Andrea, I happened to curate her, and she was in the Washington Post. Mark Jenkins even came, met her. And the cool thing about this is I was also inviting young curators from museums. And these young curators hadn't had a chance to work with working artists. So they would have a relationship, and the curator would work with the Washington artist for about a year, show them in the gallery. And the only thing I asked was that that artist would pay it forward. Pay it forward means that we support each other, and we try to make an artistic community where we show the importance of having art in our lives. And if you just imagine this situation that we're in now, that we're all home without books, without theater, without movies, without games. The arts have entertained us, and it's really the best of humanity. And again, when people ask me what my art's about, I really don't tell people what this is about. But for me, it's a joy about painting. It's a love of expression and playing. But people do tell me when they see my art that it is something that they want to live with, and it brings such happiness. And that's basically all an artist can ask, is to be valued. And I just want to keep having more paint come my way and more opportunities. So if you guys want to unmic yourself, and ask me any questions, that would be cool. So that's about it, guys. So, okay. So I want to thank everybody for being here. Jen, do you have any questions, or anybody? I can't hear anybody. So, okay.
Donna, you have to unmute yourself. You have to unmute.
I know I did.
Thank you, Barbara. That was very inspiring. I'm not an artist, but I enjoy painting, and that was a good reminder of how important art is in our lives, and how we should actively work to keep it in.
Yeah. I think it's really important. When my gallery closed, I was asked to give a little talk to the Virginia Square, Boston Metro community. And there must have been maybe about 300 people that were in the room. And they wanted to know why the gallery was closing. And basically, it was in a building that the Homeowners Association thought that didn't value art studios anymore. But I asked everybody in that room how many people loved art. And every single person raised their hand. The next question I asked was, how many people in this room have art on their walls? And almost everyone raised their hand. The third question I asked is, how many people can name a Washington artist or a local artist that you own that's on your wall? And not one. And that sort of told me something. We cannot keep going to Crate and Barrel and dropping $4,000 on a poster and frames. We can't keep going to these framers and paying these outrageous amounts. Go seek and find artists. And I think as 21st century creatives, if you enjoy the opera, enjoy music, you want your entertainers to be paid. And the same thing for your artists. If you have an art teacher, buy their art, listen to their stories, support each other. It is so important that we drop commerce to the people that really can use it. And we have a young man here that's a graphic artist. He says he's not selling. My advice to you is do what you love, and the money will come. And I know that's really hard to say, but do with less. Right now I don't even have a car. My car broke down, and I went and sell a few more paintings, and I don't really need a car. But you use less. We, as creative thinkers, we can be less materialistic. You find ways, and I think artists can find ways to be creative. But all of us need to use our playfulness again, and find joy in being playful, and things will happen. And and I feel like that's really my purpose as a instructor and as an art advocate and as an artist, is to really share that excitement that it does bring joy, but it also brings great opportunity. So I talk too much. Does anyone else have anything that you want to finish with?
So Barbara, you
Oh,
did.
Barbara, I want to say thank you so much. You know what? I love your beginning, the warm-up part, because the bare page or the bare canvas is like a little bit defeating initially. And then you think, oh my God, how do I start? And I love that you had those warm-ups.
Thank you. I mean, I do a lot of different types of warm-ups. I've been doing it for 40 years. Sometimes I sell those, but it's not about selling. Sometimes I just tear them up or I paint over them. It's about, it's really, if you watch football or baseball, they're warming up on the side. Nobody goes to their craft without that warm up. And so put your thumbs out, do these things, cross over your body. These type of mind gym exercises will make you a better painter. And if you've been in my class, you know that I make my students all warm up. When they don't, about 2 hours goes by and they painted horribly. In the last 5 minutes, when we're putting everything away, something wonderful happens. It's because it took them a long time to sort of get into that mode. And when I'm signing my paintings, when it's blank, it's really saying, it's giving me an opportunity to center myself. So I don't really do yoga. I don't really meditate, but this is what I do with this active brain I have. And I really love sharing this because I find that a lot of young students can do this and they quiet themselves, or someone that, it's not even called doodling, because I tell people to do it with their opposite, less dominant hand. Then I sometimes do it with one eye closed, sometimes with both eyes closed, and I'm able to draw and paint upside down and backwards. And that only came from doing these type of exercises. If you play tennis, you got to switch, your body back and forth. It's all about balance. And try standing up on one leg and doing a brush stroke. You're challenging your body and you're engaging your body, engaging your mind. And it can be done with anything. When I have nothing in front of me, then I might play a game of mental chess with myself. I always win. But it's the idea of challenging whatever you have in front of you, taking the tools and taking the problems and taking it to the next level. Okay. Does anyone else have anything they want to say?
Yeah, so Barbara, you going way back to the beginning, there were a couple of questions in the chat. One is from Clayton Austin, asking, does the paper change color with water? And,
yes.
And what type of paper are you using?
Very good. Thank you for asking. I use mostly 140-pound watercolor paper for just my little Zens. Anything else like this, I'm using very heavyweight paper. This is watercolor paper, 400 pounds, Arches or a Winsor Newton. I'm allergic to Arches because Arches uses a sizing on it, which is horse glue. And because I've been painting on it for 40 years now, I'm highly allergic when I wet it. So yes, it does change, and it does depend on the water. Sometimes I filter my water. Many times I use dirty water just so I can see my brush strokes first. When I work on canvas, I'm very, very careful. My water is always filtered, and I add a little bit of mold resistant that you get at like Home Depot that you add into house paint so it doesn't mold, because this is organic. A lot of the paints that we use are made with minerals, and sometimes there's like with watercolors, there's a little bit of honey or glycerin in it. And so you want to be very careful with that. But very good question. What other questions do we have?
The other question was from Corinne, and it is about how long do you spend warming up?
Oh, okay. Very good question. Sometimes I like warming up so much that I forget to do the big painting. Because I sometimes get scared. I get frightened, and it's sort of exciting. But let's say I cut off maybe about 10 feet of beautiful prime duck canvas. I hang it up on my easel, and I make a big pot of paint. I usually do several primary colors, different color blues and yellows. I got everything ready, and it's all set to go. And then I'll go over in the corner of my studio and I'll start doing my Zen. I find that I don't want to leave my Zen because I'm almost afraid that I'm going to ruin these big canvases. And my brushes and my paints, they cost so much. And I have to tell myself to let go, that I have to trust the process. And I've worked it out enough so I know what colors work. And so when I'm doing my painting, I'll start with something like this very quiet light blue. And once I make that mark, it helps me get into the mood to paint. And then the hardest part about my job is I have to watch the paint dry. And by watching the paint dry, there's a different reaction. If you work with watercolors, you'll know that it always seems really dark, and then it dries really light, the colors changes. The stuff on canvas is a whole different animal. And I'm actually now doing sculptures in resin and in plexiglass. So I'm doing like 3-dimensional work too. So yeah, it does affect it. And one thing you'll see me do is I don't use any black. If you see black, it's really a combination of the 3 primary colors coming together. And it could be because of a lot of my influences, who was Helen Frankenthaler and Morris Louis, and really about all the Washington Color School artists I just adore. And I think we learn from history where art comes from and the message, and having a signature style, but being able to make it your own. So, okay, is that it? Does anyone else have a question? I want to thank everyone for spending an hour with me and more. It's been such a lovely day. I hope you guys get creative and go out there and explore. Please find me if you can. I have, artwork for sale. We can't do any studio visits, but I really would love to meet all of you in person. You can email me, you can find me. But most important, if I can leave you with one message, let's all be kind to each other and going forward and just sharing joy and happiness. And if we could do that, whatever we're doing, that's the most important job that we have today. So I want to thank everybody. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
okay.
Bye.